Okay, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, everyone, based on where you are. I can see a lot of you saying hello in the chat, and I can see quite a lot of you already joining. So I think we're set to go, and I want to welcome you to this session of Spring Day webinars, which is focusing on formative assessment. And in particular, um, I want to focus my session today in giving you an overview about formative assessment for young learners and how at Pearson we have been developing tools to help you carry out formative assessment in the context of remote teaching. But just before kicking off, a couple of words about me. My name is Ellie, and I've worked in the English language learning industry for the last 15 years. Um, I've got experience with print and digital publications, and an area that is particularly close to my heart is the area of young learners and pedagogy for young learners applied to foreign language teaching. So I'm really excited to bring you to my expertise on an area that is really really close to my heart. Just before kicking off the presentation, I would welcome you all to use the chat box if there are any questions or any comments. And during the presentation, we will be launching a couple of polls also to facilitate interactions, because I value this sort of presentation as an opportunity to start a bit of a dialogue. I value very much the input and the feedback from teachers like you. So, as I said, my plan for today is to talk about formative assessment for young learners and how formative assessment fits into a regular teaching and learning practice. And in all this context, I want to bring the example of a product that we launched a couple of years ago called the English benchmark young learners, and how this product can actually support you with formative assessment, specifically at an unprecedented time like the one that we are facing now, where teaching is happening in presence to a degree, maybe in some countries, but mostly is happening remotely or is happening in a hybrid form. And I do want to start precisely with that, with acknowledging what an unprecedented time this has been for education and for our life in general, and how it has forced all of us to rethink some of the core assumptions we used to have around teaching and learning. So in this context, I would like to share with you the findings of the global survey that we ran in the summer last year, where we collected about 8,000 responses from learners and from educators from around the world. Um, and the purpose of this survey was really to canvass ideas on how the world of education was feeling about the pandemic. And the general consensus, I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear, is that the pandemic will have long-lasting effect on how we perceive education and how education will be going forward. Um, and digging deeper into the results, what I found quite interesting was to compare the views of people pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, and you would see that there is a strong belief that more and more people are predicting more virtual schooling in years to come. And what surprised me from a young learner's point of view, from a children's point of view, is that this view was very strong also for the K-12 segment, so for primary and secondary education, which is what we see also in the next slide, where you actually see that even across a number of geographies, it seems like online learning is here to stay, not just for the tertiary sector, which to me would be the place where adult learners already had some experience with virtual learning before the pandemic, but also for the kids sector, for the K-12 sector. And even in some places, this belief is stronger for the children segment than it is for the adult segment. So I just wanted to leave you with a couple of notes from this survey. And if you're interested, we can share the link to this survey at the end of this presentation. But this brings me back to knowing from you. I would love to know what have been your biggest challenges with remote teaching over the last, I would say, year and a half. So um, we're ready to launch the first poll, and I won't read aloud everything in the poll, but I'll leave you a couple of minutes to respond, and then we can comment on the results. Perfect. You should see the polls on your screen now. I don't at the moment, but I believe that you are. Okay, yes, you should see the poll question on your screen. So what I want to know, what have been your biggest challenges with remote teaching? And you can select more than one answer. So I see that answers are still coming in, but I think we have some clear winners, and some of you are also commenting on the chat. Of course, keeping learners motivated, engaged has been um, an undeniable challenge also in our general life, I would say, in this situation. Um, Followed by monitoring progress, which I think is quite interesting and related to checking understanding of new concepts. Assessment is there as another strong answer, and a lot of you are talking about all of the above. So clearly there is a thread about engagement and a motivation, but also there is a thread around ensuring learners are on track with their learning. And of course, adapting classroom teaching to online learning. So that's great. Um, so for the next one, I've got another quick poll, and this time I would love to hear more a bit about your specific challenges around assessment. I think we saw that some assessment challenges came from the previous poll. Now I want to know what specifically has been challenging when it comes to assessing learners in this context of hybrid of remote teaching. So we're ready to launch the next poll now. And you should see the poll on the screen. So again, I'll leave you a few minutes to let you answer the question. As we are waiting for a few more people to respond, and I'll comment on the results, I'm just monitoring the chat and see how cheating and the fact that it is easier to cheat online. Yes, it's a big problem that should be acknowledged. Um, of course. Um, What's interesting to see from the results is I think we have two clear winners. One is having less opportunities to monitor students with remote teaching, and I think, yeah, let's face it, it is a constraint of remote teaching. And the other one is probably a problem that used to be there also in traditional teaching, in face to face teaching, is having to spend a lot of time creating and marking tests. Um, I think most of you have responded now. Uh, what I was going to say is, I hope that this with session we can give you a sense of resources that can help you, even in the context of remote teaching. And specifically, we will be talking about the product that I mentioned earlier, English Benchmark Young Learners. Uh, but let me go back to the deck now, and we can. Yeah, let me take over the. Yes. Okay, let me spend a few words on formative assessment, because I like to contextualize formative assessment as a practice that really fits into a global teaching and learning cycle, what I call a teaching and learning cycle, and that I show on screen with this simplified chart. I call it a simplified chart because in essence, it does represent all the core jobs that are intrinsic to the job of teaching. And you see how complex that is, and how many steps and how many consideration it already involves. So first of all, I want to acknowledge that teaching means at the very start of the course or at the very start of the year to really understand your learners level and to understand their needs, what they're able to do, but what their gaps are, so that you are able to develop a program that is aligned with the learner's level of ability. Um, and the job of teaching, and from then on, is the most obvious part of teaching, which is delivering instructions. But delivering instruction goes very much hand in hand with being able to ensure that students are on track with their learning, that they're understanding what's been taught, and if they're not, being able to repair, being able to remediate on gaps. So this is where I see the loop of plan, teach, check, repair, and then plan, teach, check, repair is really an ongoing loop that goes on and on throughout the duration of the course or throughout the education of the academic year. Um, And typically at the end of the course, then you have some sort of formal summative assessment, which I've got here in the purple box, which can take the form of an end of the course, end of the year exam, and sometimes it can even lead to a formal high stakes certificated test like the Cambridge Young Learners Test or like Pearson International Certificate Young Learners. So I wanted to focus on this chart just to show you at a glance how assessment is a key component of the teaching and learning cycle. It's not something you add on top. It's really an integral part of the learner journey and the teaching and learning journey. And I like to think of assessment in two levels. On one hand is what I call the assessment with the big A, which is the one that it's most obvious to those that don't work in education, and this is what I refer into my chart as the assessment in at the end of the course, the assessment in the purple box or the certification, for example. But what is more subtle and really crucial to successful teaching and successful learning is the assessment with the small a, which is the formative assessment. And it's the ongoing work of observing, checking, providing opportunities for practice so that you have evidence that your students are with you, are following you with what you are teaching them. And in this context, let me launch the last poll for this session. I'm curious to know what kind of formative assessment strategies you use in your day-to-day teaching. Um, so again, I'll give you a minute or so to respond. Great. Let me jump in, and as I see that quite a lot of you are already responding, and once again, I think we have no surprises here in terms of formative assessment is a little bit of everything. But I see a lot positive responses around monitoring class participation, and then homework is a big part of that. Observation, end of unit tests, absolutely. Those are all good strategies for formative assessment. And once that, as was showing from your earlier answers, strategies that are suffering a bit in the context of remote teaching, as you're not able to be with your learners and observe them firsthand. So definitely all of them. And I think we can move on, and I hope that with the next section of my presentation, I can give you a sense of the product that can help you with formative assessment and with especially with formative assessment at in a remote context. So let me tell you a little bit about English Benchmark Young Learners, which the best way of describing it for me, it's a digital test that is designed with formative assessment in mind specifically. And what is unique about it, what I'm very excited about it, is that it is a test that is designed with young learners at the front. Um, it is a test that is designed to make assessment a stress-free experience, and even more than that, is a test that is meant to make assessment fun and an engaging experience for young learners. Because, like we said earlier, the formative assessment is part of the ongoing teaching, practice, and learning, and therefore, in a way, doesn't need to carry the stigma of stress, pressure, um, like type of assessment. Um, I'll get to the details of that, but I just wanted to give you the headlines. And has a formative assessment. Um, as thinking about formative assessment as a big umbrella, really, these tests can be used in a variety of ways or in a variety of situations. It can be used as a diagnostic tool at the start of the course, like we were seeing earlier in the teaching and learning cycle, and it provides you with lots of data on which you can plan your teaching, and I'll get to that in a minute. It can also be used in a true formative assessment fashion as a progress monitor. So at specific times during your course or during the primary education cycles, you can use this test to have checkpoints and take a picture of learners' ability, and compare how that picture compares with the previous one, whether there's been progress or whether there's been a plateau of learners' ability. Also, another use case we hear quite a lot about is that it can be used as a readiness indicator for in preparation for high stakes exams, for certificated exams, and even in this context of the pandemic, which poses restrictions to people physically being able to go and attend formal testing test centers, sometimes it can be used also as a replacement of those tests, as a faithful representation and measure of a learner's level of ability. On the nuts and bolts of the test, it is a test that is assessing learners' ability across the four skills, so speaking, reading, listening, and writing. It is a test that has been developed originally as a tablet-based experience, so it is an app. And now, just this year, this month in particular, we are launching a piece of software that enables people to consume the test on laptop and desktop computers. So effectively, we are launching what we're calling an emulator, a software that emulates the tablet experience on laptop and desktops, so that effectively learners are able to take this test across a range of devices. And we took this into consideration, thinking about the limitations of remote teaching and the limitations of availability around tablets around in households around the world. It is a test that is scored on, the scores are reported on the Common European Framework and on our own developed, Pearson developed global scale of English. It caters, broadly speaking, for the age range of 6 to 14, so starting from the bottom end of primary school to middle school. It comes in 6 levels, from pre-A1, so basically beginners, up to B1 plus. And as a digital test, it is an auto-marked test across all the 4 skills, and results are available within an hour. And hopefully you already see the benefits of being able to assess a full class or even a number of classes and being able to get scores immediately. And especially when I think about speaking, that is a massive gain because scheduling speaking tests one to one or in pairs with students would really mean a long investment, a long time investment. So let me get to talking a little bit about the design principles around this test. And I won't stress I will never stress enough how this is a test for young learners, being designed around the needs and the abilities of young learners. In fact, we have applied gamification principles in the design of the overall test, but also of the activities, so that each activity is designed in a way that learners want to get to the end. And related to this, the design of the activity includes a range of graphics, animations, and videos, so that students are more feeling like they're playing a game. It doesn't feel that dissimilar from classroom activities they may take as part of your instruction, rather than taking an English test. And that is a huge benefit because it takes the anxiety, it takes the stress, it takes the performance stress out of the equation, and it helps learner to really perform at the best level of their ability, at the true level of their ability. Another key principle that inform the design, that is, I'm sure you will all agree with me, a very big principle in young learners design is that all the scenes or the context and the scenarios that the activities are built around are really relevant to young learners, and they're really relevant to their life experience. And on top of all of this, our UX team did an amazing job in ensuring that every single button, every single navigation tool would have the needs and the abilities of young learners in mind. Um, and Now switching on to a more an academic and pedagogical design, I wanna take you through the what is in this test. And let me start by saying that this is a test that has been designed with an integrated skill approach. By this, I mean that there are a range of task types, of question types that assess more than one skill. And this is in line with a very communicative approach where we want to replicate as much as possible real life exchanges. So here is an example of a listening task, and all the listening tasks are designed as in order to give students the ability to respond to a prompt, so to take action to what they listen to, which is an integral part of communication. So you'll see that we have things like listen and act, or answer a questions, and so on. The speaking part, very similar to the listening part, is again designed around this idea that communication, spoken communication relies on successful comprehension of the spoken input. So again, here speaking questions are two-dimensional and include listen and retell, or answer the question, always include a listening component to them. Speaking is the section in the test that is assessed via our via our artificial intelligence technology. We pride ourselves to have advanced artificial intelligence technology that can ensure and guarantee a reliable, accurate, and bias-free results in with assessing speaking, as we often hear the case that speaking is an area of anxiety, even for teachers that are not sure whether they're able to assess speaking in a fair manner or in an objective manner. And then I want to give you a sense of reading activities that we've got an example here on screen, but reading activities are graded, and they go from a word level and build up to sentence level and text level activities as students progress in their ability. And last, just giving you a sense of writing activities. And again, here we range from controlled writing activities to more open-ended writing activities, with the caveat that though that writing is not tested at level one for obvious reasons, because often level one equates to the first year or the first 2 years of primary, and it's not a skill we're testing yet at that level. Um, Going on, moving forward, I want to give you a sense of all the very powerful reporting that can come out from this test. Because as a formative assessment, as a formative tool, I think that the real juice, the real richness of the test lies in the information that you get back for as a teacher, and these are information that you can act upon, be it just information that you can use to plan your next stage of teaching, or information that you can use to do targeted activities with a specific group of students. As we know, I was a teacher myself. In a class, you don't it's really hard to reach a very homogeneous level, and you often have to deal with mixed levels in the same class. So when it comes to scoring and reporting, we have very powerful types of reports that let you review performance at a class level. We let you drill down into individual students' performance, but also this test also generates reports and certificate for parents, because parents are a key stakeholder, especially in the ages of primary education. So let me give you an example of what the performance summaries look like. Um, Essentially, these are broken into sections. On one hand, there is a visual snapshot of performance that you see there by the graph chart. And in this case, this is an example of a performance summary for the class, but the same view can be available for the individual student. And you can see a breakdown by skill and an alignment to the CEFR and our GSE scale. And then the next section of the performance summary is the detailed information on what students are able to do. And these are expressed with can do statements broken up into the different skills. On top of that, and this is where I think we're really speaking very closely to formative assessment, are the recommendations that are again split in two parts. On one hand, we have suggested learning objectives, global scale of English learning objectives that you can use to stretch your students and to take your students to the next level of ability, or you can use simply to inform your own planning and your own curriculum. On top of this, if you are using Pearson courseware, if you're using some of the courses that we produce for primary and lower secondary age, you can also visualize activities that relate to the specific course that you are using. That is an added benefit. You don't need to use Pearson courseware in order to use this test, but it is an added benefit if you happen to do so. If you don't use Pearson courseware, you would still have suggested learning objectives to help you plan the next cycle of your teaching. Um, the last part of of the reports I want to show you is the record of learners' progress. So, as I said, as a formative tool, the one of the crucial part is being able to compare performance over time. And what this chart is showing you is how performance is increasing across multiple test sessions. And you can do this both at class level or at student level. And you can use this in your parents' conversation, in your conversation with an academic supervisor to show improvement and the effectiveness of your teaching overall. Um, and last thing that I want to call out about this is that you can do this both for overall scores, but also for individual skills. So hopefully I've given you a good overview of the power of this program, and specifically the power of the richness of the data that it provides you and that can help you with formative assessment. In the last part of the presentation, I want to focus on what happens with remote teaching and what are the things that we need to keep in mind when we are assessing learners remotely with this product. So um, let me start by setting the context and say, generally speaking, how this test works. As you probably have guessed from my earlier section, with this digital test, you have a test administration platform that helps you do all the things that you expect to do in relation to upload a group of students, manage classes, assign a test. And then the crucial part of this platform is really reviewing the results and reviewing the reports with all the information that I shared with you just before. Um, in terms of what you need to run this test, as I said earlier, the test was conceived as tablet based. So if your students are taking the test on a tablet, they will need to download an app. However, these tests can also be consumed on a desktop and laptops. So if your students want to experience this through these devices, they have to download an emulator that mirrors the app experience. And then the other thing that you need is a good quality headset, ideally like the one that I'm wearing now with a boom microphone, to be able to ensure the best results with the speaking section. And of course, for the emulator experience, since you are operating with a traditional laptop or desktop, you will need a keyboard and an external mouse um, to successfully complete the test. Your learners will need this. Um, in terms of best practice, I want to spend a few words on this and say that best practice between a remote assessment and in-class assessment don't vary a great deal. What varies are two things primarily. First, the level of control that you have around um, all the context in which students are taking the test, and I'll get to that in a minute. And the second one is that you will need to deal with a new stakeholder when it comes to remote teaching. You will need to really bring on board parents in the assessment experience. So let's look at it from the point of view of stakeholders, which are learners and parents in the context of a remote test. For learners, it's important to remember to familiarize learners with the test experience. So, and to this end, we've developed for each level of a test, we developed a series of sample questions that you can use both to to present in a Zoom class, for example, in an online class. But we also encourage you to recommend using these sample questions with the learners in their own time. And that is just to familiarize learners with the requirements of the test. The other part is parents, and parents, as I said, are a key stakeholder, and they need to be on board with the overall testing plan, and that means they need to be set up with the right technology and the right software. They need to ensure that their child is set up with the right technology and software, so downloading the app or downloading the emulator as needed. They need to commit to a test date that you set. I know that schools set a test week, a window in which the test needs to be taken. Other schools prefer to set a specific time and date. Um, Up to you. But that is the crux, that parents need to commit to that as much as they commit to the remote teaching schedule, for example. And then parents would be needed to supervise their child during the test, just to ensure, not to help them, of course, but just to ensure that everything is going smoothly and the child is focusing and working on the test. So, um, in this context, let me share with you how the full testing experience works end to end for a remote testing experience. And I've broken this down into before taking the test, and after taking the test. Essentially, this is a path that you as a teacher would need to follow anyway, whether the test happens in school or remotely. What are new are the steps that are I've marked with a red star on the screen, that involve basically parents' involvement. So before taking the test, the journey starts with the teacher assigning a test and generating a test access code that is then shared. Normally is shared with students, but in this case is shared with the parents along with a set of instructions of what they need to do. And parents need to act upon on these instructions. So they need to download the emulator or they need to download the app in order for their kids to experience the test. And we are providing institutions with a full set of parents' guides and best practice guides to help you communicate this information with the parents. Um, Another crucial element of before the test date, that section, is teachers familiarizing the students with the practice questions, as I was saying earlier. On the test date, it's simple. It's parents being there for the duration of the test. So that means parents will be there to ensure that the test launches correctly, and they're there to ensure that kids are behaving correctly. And after the test, once the test is submitted, nothing changes. The teacher will receive the results in the school in the test administration portal, and they will be able to do all sorts of um, data investigation, like I was showing you earlier, at class level and at students level. So let me summarize best practices in three key factors, three key considerations. And once again, I wanna call your attention that nothing is changing to an in-class test experience. What is changing is your level of control on these factors. And so it is important to think about those and to really train and really make sure that all your stakeholders, in this case, parents and learners, are aware of this best practice. So, on one hand, are the technological factors and ensuring that learners and parents enable the learners to have access to the right level of technology and the a stable internet connection and all the things that I mentioned earlier. Then there are behavioral considerations which maybe are less obvious to a parent, but these really mean that both parents and learner are committed to a test plan, and that on the test day, um, kids are there, can be focused and invested for the duration of the test. And the parents are there to troubleshoot problems or to correct behaviors. For example, if a child is speaking too loudly, or if they are speaking too softly, or if they're chewing the microphone, for example, just to correct that behavior that a teacher would normally do if they were in a class context, but they can't because they are remote. So in a way, the parent is really acting as a proxy, and it is our job to help you communicate what the parents' expectations are when it comes to remote testing. And the last are environmental considerations. So, for example, uh, making sure that the test is taken in the right conditions. The test is taken in a room where there is very limited background noise. Sometimes even the noise of a fan of a heating can affect the ability to correctly capture the audio input of the child. So these are other considerations that you probably wouldn't need to worry too much if you had all your students in a controlled environment. Now, with the remote teaching context, you're removing this control away out of the equation. So you need to think about how to communicate these things to parents. And we've done a lot of the thinking for you in trying to develop a full set of training resources for parents around this test. So this brings me to the end of the presentation. I hope I've given you an overview of formative assessment, how we're thinking about it at Pearson, what we are developing to support you with formative assessment, and what we're doing to develop to help you cope with a situation of hybrid of remote teaching and remote testing. Um, we can share with you a link to a leaflet with more information on this test, but I just now want to open it up for a few questions for a few minutes, and also remind you that we will have the opportunity for an extended question time. We are organizing what we're calling coffee breaks tomorrow with all the presenters for day one, and you can have more of an opportunity to ask more extended questions. But now we have about 5 minutes for question, and let me pass it on to Sophia and Charlie to see what has come in. So I can see you've been very active in the chat. I've not been able to keep an eye, but if Charlie or Sophia are on the line, we can hear what questions have come through.
Hi, Ellie. Thank you so much for that. That was really good. There's a lot of discussion in the chat, a lot of feedback to what you've been saying and answering to your questions, but I haven't actually seen any questions. If there are any questions that you'd like to put to Ellie now, please do put them in the chat. Here's one. How can one improve test perceptions to minimize stress? So calm learners down ahead of their test, try to sort of ease their concerns beforehand.
Well, this is a very interesting question, and one that we've used a lot in the design itself of the test. And my answer would almost be trying to play down as much as possible that this is a test, because effectively formative assessment is part of like I said earlier, is part of a day-to-day teaching and learning cycle. So So you do want to set the expectation this is something serious, of course, but at the same time, you don't want to overload the experience with too much stress. And that's why I say, as long as learners understand that this is an important moment where they have to dedicate 30 or 40 minutes of their attention, then I think with this test, we have done a good job of presenting the test in a way that is not daunting, that is very child friendly, game like. In fact, one of the best feedback we received from customers was that kids do not feel like they're taking the test. They feel like they're playing a game. They're really engaged and they want to get to the end of it. And that is what has driven the design of the test overall. So in answer to your question, I would try to play down that this is a test because it is a formative practice as much as other formative practice, although it is a little bit more formal because it happens at a specific time and a specific moment in time in your course. So that's my recommendation here.
And so another question around the kind of perception of the test, but this time in terms of parents, how do we encourage parents to let their children do it, to keep them from intervening when we're remote testing?
Yeah, I empathize with that question because as I used to spend a lot of time in markets speaking with teachers, I know that this is the reality that parents often are there and interfere with the test experience. My advice here is really around educating parents why you're testing. This is not a high stakes test whether you get a certificate in order to get into a secondary school, for example. So there is not a really outcome out of a test other than that if other than you being able to plan effectively your teaching to the true level of students' ability. So I would really emphasize this, that if students are being if parents are helping students out, that will not be a true reflection, and that will impact your teaching. It will mean that your teaching is going to be too hard, or is going to be not quite on level for what your students, and effectively who suffer from it is the learner. So to me, it is again about educating parents on why you're testing, what you're trying to do with the test, and that this is a formative test as opposed to a high stakes certificated test. So again, that is my advice, and I don't think that if parents really grasp it, and I think that if parents grasp it, they understand that it's against their child interest to support them in the test.
Great, yes. How can teachers, customers access this product?
Sorry, can I?
How can our audience get hold of this test?
Okay, what we recommend is contacting the sales. Well, first of all, we have a range of marketing material onto our website, and we can share the link with you. Then, after that, I encourage you to contact your local sales representative. And let me call out that we are offering a range of piloting activities where you can actually see how the test works, perhaps initially internally with your network of teachers, and then we can also offer you ways in which you can pilot it with a small number of students, so that you can really see firsthand all the rich information that you can get out of the test. So just to recap, marketing website and contacting your local sales representative for a demo and potential piloting.
That's great. I think that's all we have time for.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia, and thank you everyone for your participation during the webinar. And I was just glancing over the different comments. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have more questions, please do come to the coffee break session tomorrow. Thank you.